Hello, Reddit. I'm struggling with an overwhelming situation involving my family, and I need some advice. It's long and messy, so I apologize in advance. But I'm truly at a crossroads and am wondering if I've become too cold-hearted, or if I'm justified in my decision. I'm 58 years old, and I have two children, Emily, 35 female, and Michael, 32 male. I raised them with my late husband, who passed away over a decade ago. Since then, I've done my best to hold the family together, instilling in my kids the importance of family, honesty, and trust. I come from a very close-knit family myself, and that bond extended to my sister Linda, 55 female, and her daughter Sophie, 34 female. Emily and Sophie grew up like sisters, best friends from the start. They were inseparable through their childhood, teenage years, and even into their early adulthood. Linda and I were thrilled watching our daughters grow up together so closely. They shared everything: secrets, hobbies, interests. They both excelled academically and even went to the same college, which kept their bond strong. When Sophie started dating Daniel, 36 male, 5 years ago, we thought he was the perfect addition to our family. He was a charming, handsome man with a great career, and most importantly, he treated Sophie like gold. Daniel quickly became a fixture in our family, and Linda and I couldn't have been more thrilled to see Sophie so happy. Over time, Daniel proposed, and Sophie excitedly began planning their dream wedding. Everyone was so excited, including Emily. At least that's what I thought. The day of Sophie and Daniel's wedding was supposed to be one of joy and celebration. Everything was set up perfectly. The beautiful church, the floral arrangements, and guests who traveled from near and far to witness their union. Sophie looked stunning in her gown, and I remember thinking that she had never looked happier. My sister Linda was practically glowing with pride. But there was something off with Emily that day. I noticed it early on. She was jittery, kept glancing at her phone, and seemed distracted. I assumed it was just nerves or excitement for Sophie. After all, her best friend was getting married. Then, as Sophie stood at the altar, waiting for the ceremony to begin, something happened that I will never forget for the rest of my life. Emily stood up from her seat and began walking toward the altar. I felt my stomach drop, unsure of what she was doing. Was she about to give a last-minute speech or make some dramatic declaration of love for her cousin? No one could have prepared me for what came next. Emily walked up to Daniel, whispered something in his ear, and suddenly, Daniel's entire expression changed. Without saying a word, he took Emily's hand, and the two of them ran out of the church, leaving Sophie standing there, confused and heartbroken, in front of a room full of stunned guests. It was chaos. Sophie collapsed in tears. Linda was screaming, demanding to know what was going on, and the guests were murmuring in shock and confusion. I was frozen in place, unable to process what had just happened. My daughter had just ruined her cousin's wedding by running off with the groom. The days following the wedding were a blur of anger, heartbreak, and confusion. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. Emily and Daniel had been having an affair behind Sophie's back for over a year. Emily later confessed that she had fallen in love with Daniel and couldn't bear to let him marry Sophie, who she claimed he didn't love. According to Emily, Daniel had been planning to leave Sophie all along, but hadn't had the courage to call off the wedding, until Emily took matters into her own hands. When I confronted Emily about what she had done, she was unapologetic. She didn't even seem to comprehend the gravity of the situation or the depth of the betrayal. "Mom," she said, "Daniel and I are meant to be together. He loves me, not Sophie. It would have been worse for them to go through with the wedding and live a lie. Sophie will get over it." Her lack of remorse shocked me to my core. Sophie was utterly destroyed by the betrayal, and Linda, my sister, who had always been so close to me, was inconsolable. She blamed me for Emily's actions, accusing me of raising a selfish, immoral daughter. I had never felt so ashamed in my life. Over the next few weeks, the family completely fractured. Sophie was heartbroken, and Linda and I stopped speaking. Emily moved in with Daniel, and they started a life together as if nothing had happened. She didn't reach out to Sophie or the rest of the family, nor did she offer any apology or explanation beyond her belief that she had done the right thing. As a result, I made a painful decision. I told Emily that she was no longer welcome in my life until she took responsibility for what she had done and made amends with Sophie and the family. I also informed her that I was cutting her out of my will, as I could not in good conscience leave my estate to someone who had caused so much harm and shown no remorse. Emily didn't seem fazed. She said she was happy with Daniel and didn't need anything from me. I was devastated, but resolved to stand by my decision. In the years since the wedding incident, the damage to our family has been immense. Sophie went through a long period of depression and heartbreak, and she has never fully recovered from the betrayal. She's in therapy and slowly rebuilding her life, but it's been incredibly hard for her to trust anyone again. My relationship with Linda has been strained to the breaking point. We speak occasionally, but the closeness we once had is gone, shattered by what Emily did. Family gatherings are awkward, with Emily's name being a taboo subject. Even my son Michael, who was always protective of his sister, has cut contact with her. He was disgusted by her actions and believes she deserves every consequence that comes her way. As for Emily and Daniel, from what I've heard, they moved to a new city, got married in a small private civil ceremony, which none of the family attended, and have since had 2 children, a toddler and a baby. Despite the passage of time, Emily never made any attempt to apologize or reconcile with the family. It seemed she was content to live her life with Daniel, regardless of the destruction they left in their wake. I had resigned myself to the idea that I would never see Emily again, and that was something I had to come to terms with. Until 3 weeks ago. One rainy afternoon, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I was shocked to see Emily standing there, holding a toddler in her arms and a baby in a stroller. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling, "I need your help." She explained that Daniel had lost his job after being involved in some unethical practices at work, which had left them in dire financial straits. They had been evicted from their apartment and were living in motels or sometimes in their car. The kids were suffering, she said, and they had nowhere else to go. Emily begged me to let them stay with me, just until we get back on our feet. She said that her children, my grandchildren, deserved better than the life they were currently living, and that she was desperate for help. I stood there speechless. Here was my daughter, who had torn apart our family, betrayed her cousin, and shown no remorse for any of it, now standing at my doorstep asking for my help because her life had fallen apart. And yet, in her arms were my grandchildren, innocent children who had done nothing wrong. Part of me wanted to pull her in, hug her, and tell her everything would be okay. But another part of me, the part that still feels the sting of her betrayal and the pain she caused Sophie, recoiled. How could I help her after everything she had done? Wasn't it her responsibility to face the consequences of her actions? I told her that while I sympathize with her children's plight, I couldn't allow her to stay in my home. I offered to help by paying for a hotel for a few nights and giving her some money for food and essentials, but I made it clear that she couldn't stay with me. Emily's face fell. She accused me of being heartless, of punishing her children for her mistakes. She said I was a terrible mother and grandmother for abandoning her in her time of need. She cried and pleaded, but I stood firm. Eventually she left, and I haven't heard from her since. Since that day, I've been tormented by guilt. Those children are my grandchildren, despite I've never met them, and they're innocent in all of this. Should I have put aside my anger toward Emily for their sake? Is it cruel for me to refuse to help, knowing that they're suffering? But at the same time, Emily has never once acknowledged the pain she caused or made any attempt to make amends. Allowing her back into my life feels like a betrayal to Sophie, Linda, and the rest of the family. Michael supports my decision and believes that Emily needs to face the consequences of her actions. He says she dug her own grave, and now she has to lie in it. But I can't shake the feeling that maybe I'm punishing the wrong people. Her children, my grandchildren, who didn't ask for any of this. So, Reddit. Am I the a-hole for refusing to let my daughter and her children stay with me after what she did to our family? OP has done what she could to help her grandchildren by offering money and food. But that doesn't mean OP has to let Emily back into her life. She didn't need her mother when things were good. Her lack of remorse for the massive hurt she caused her family is telling. OP is not punishing the children. They are innocent in this. But it's also not OP's responsibility to provide long-term support for someone who hasn't even acknowledged her wrongdoing and didn't need her family for so long. Emily's actions were cruel, and she hasn't faced the consequences yet. I can imagine how hard it is, as she is still OP's daughter. But what she did is unforgivable. And now let's hear the community's opinion. This is such a heartbreaking situation, and I feel for you. You're not the villain here. Emily put herself in this position when she destroyed her cousin's life and acted like it was no big deal. Family helps family, sure, but it's a two-way street. Emily didn't just hurt Sophie. She tore apart your relationship with your sister and the entire family dynamic. not the a-hole. But I do feel for those kids. Maybe you can explore other options, like helping them directly through a trust, or by talking to a social worker so the kids aren't caught in the middle. No a-holes, but it's such a complicated situation. Your daughter's actions were deeply hurtful, and the emotional damage she caused can't be ignored. You were right to cut her out at the time, but now that there are children involved, perhaps there's a way to help without letting her directly back into your life. Maybe you could establish boundaries. Help her financially or provide some support to the children, but keep your emotional distance until, and if, she ever shows real remorse. This isn't black and white, and I hope you find peace in whatever decision you make. Not the a-hole. What Emily did to Sophie was absolutely unforgivable, and the fact that she's never apologized shows a complete lack of empathy. I understand why you cut her off. Her choices have consequences, and it sounds like she still doesn't understand that. You've already gone above and beyond by giving her temporary financial assistance. If she's still blaming you and not acknowledging the destruction she caused, it's on her to figure it out. You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone warm, and she needs to own up to her mistakes if she ever wants back into your life. I, 26 male, have a stepsister, 23 female. We were never close. She would lie and try to get me in trouble, but my dad and her mom would always catch on. She tried ruining a few of my school projects because she was jealous I was doing really well in school, and she was struggling. She even went so far as to try and hide my acceptance letter to my dream university. And I tried to distance myself from her as much as possible because she is not family. Everyone in my side of the family does not recognize her as family either. That does not make me an a-hole. She is a stranger, and I hate her. Anyways, I'm doing really well for myself. I got lead engineer pretty early on in my career because I never miss an opportunity to work overtime. I've never missed a single day, been late, or needed help with work. Instead, I was the one helping. I earned 6 figures. I moved out of our apartment complex, and with my cousin, we now own a home. My relatives and my dad, whom I still have contact with, visited a few times. A very distinguished part of the house is my flag of Italy. Stepsister was able to find my house because of this detail. All the houses looked very similar. Apparently, my dad kicked her out and told her my address and told her to live with me. She came knocking on my door asking me to stay a few nights and for some money, to which I refused. She kept persistently knocking. I asked her to stop. She said she was my sister and said I have every right to stay in this property. I threatened to get law enforcement involved to remove her from the premises. She was so angry to the point where she tried to throw a rock on my home country's flag. I was so mad. She left screaming, and she is now staying with her aunt from her mom's side. I've been getting angry calls from her side of the family, to which I had to block a few numbers. My friends and family, Dad's side, told me I was too nice with how I handled the situation. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. A stepsister is not a half-sister, so you're referring to someone you share no DNA with, which means she isn't your sister and you have no obligations of any sort. And by the way, Dad owes you an apology for sending her your way. Not the a-hole. On what planet does she have the right to say that because of her stepbrother lives in a house, that she gets to too? There's your entitlement. As far as the other family members who are giving you grief for not letting her stay at your place, have just graciously made themselves available for her to stay at their place. Not the a-hole. I don't think you owe her anything. She is entitled in acting this way. You don't have to let her stay or borrow money if you've never been close. And your dad overstepped giving her your address and telling her to stay with you. Weird. Keep blocking their numbers and just get on with your life. I'm female, about to graduate from university this year, and I'm really happy about it. This is not the US, so I'm graduating from my major directly. Not saying what for privacy reasons. My mom has been married to my stepdad for 10 years now, and he has 3 kids from a previous relationship. I'm not really close to them, but I used to spend weekends and half the holidays with them. My dad, who was also remarried, but I wasn't close to my stepmom and her kids either, passed away 2 years ago. I was a total daddy's girl. He was my fave person in the world, and I miss him dearly every day. I also love sushi. Neither of my parents like seafood, and my mom refused to eat or take me to sushi places because I had to suck it up for her, while my dad did the effort, so we always went to a small place near his home. He promised me that for my graduation, he'd take me to this big sushi place in town, high-end and expensive, just for the laughs. I looked forward to it every year until he passed. I already knew that my mom wouldn't take me, so I made the plan myself just to close that chapter of my life with my dad. I invited both of my step and bio families, grandparents, 2 uncles each, and my step-parents and their kids. And I'm paying for the whole deal. Expensive, yes, but I've been saving and I can afford it. My mom said no, that neither she or her family would come, and my stepdad said that we should rearrange all the plan to cater everyone. He also said that 2 of his kids developed seafood allergy, and it's not possible for them to come. I said bummer, but anyway, I wasn't going to change my plan, and they're welcome to not come. Both my step-parents and my mom knows why I want this restaurant, and my stepdad said it was insensitive of me because I was putting a dead man's wishes above my living family. I just shrugged and said whatever he said was pointless to me, and we might be able to do something the next day, but my plans will not change, and they can either come or not. I don't really care. My mom has been sending me texts, calling me spoiled and a brat. But my grandparents, her parents, told me not to listen to her and that they're looking forward to see me at my dinner. My mom also sent me some other restaurants so we can both compromise, and my stepdad offered to pay for the dinner. But I keep saying no. So am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. It's not about a dead man's wishes, as your stepfather so crassly put it. It's about your wishes. You're the one who is graduating. You're the one who's paying. It isn't up to stepfather or your mother to decide where you celebrate your graduation. If they want a meal they like, they can host another celebration dinner for you. Not the a-hole. Let me get this straight. You plan to have this special dinner for years, and they want to change it? No. Just because your dad thought of it with you doesn't change anything. It's for you, not him, although I'm sure he will be on your mind. If they can't understand that, then they don't need to go. They don't know what they're missing. Not the a-hole. This is your party. You get to choose where it's at and who is going. If other people want to have parties, they can choose those things for their own parties. I currently have a broken tailbone because my boss decided to kick the office chair when I went to sit. I'm not mad at her because I could easily see myself doing the same thing, and who would have thought? My wife is pretty pissed. She keeps bringing it up and acting like I should do something, but like I said, I don't really blame her. I'm currently out of work and my boss came over today to check on me. She apologized again and she made cupcakes, so I think that is more than enough. My wife lectured her about how dumb and immature it was. This woman ducking owns the company, so that was a stupid thing to do. She was actually really nice and understanding. When she left, I told my wife that she was completely inappropriate, and how dare she jeopardize my job like that. We had a fight, and I told her that she really embarrassed me, which she did not take well. Yes, the a-hole. Your wife is right, and you have every right to sue for any medical expenses, out-of-work pay, and disability. Your boss only came over to make sure you won't sue, and she acted like a good guy with concern to throw you off. Don't be fooled. She only came over to see if you were angry enough to sue her. What she did was a liability, and you could end up with long-term pain because of this, and suing the crap out of her. Even though your boss was joking, what she did was an intentional liability. So yes, your wife was right, and you are wrong. Yes, the a-hole. And if your boss fired you because your wife was pissed that said boss injured you in a prank, I'm fairly certain that there's a big lawsuit coming their way. This isn't the office. A boss can't run over somebody with their car and it just gets laughed off. You're such a huge a-hole that it can be seen from space. Seriously. You admit that your wife sees your relationship with your boss as flirty, yet your wife takes the back burner. You and your boss act like effing children, and it has affected your wife because she's the one taking care of you. You haven't answered any questions about the flirting. You're misdirecting your anger because your wife actually gives a crap about you. Grow up and learn how to treat your wife. Put yourself in her shoes and imagine she has a broken tailbone because of her stupid and careless flirting with her boss.